The sun was setting over the honey-colored stone cottages of Bourton-on-the-Water, casting a golden haze over the narrow streets. The scent of lavender drifted from the gardens, mingling with the faint aroma of freshly baked bread from the village bakery. Inside the Willow House, a grand country inn with ivy-clad walls and mullioned windows, a long dining table had been set for the evening's rehearsal dinner. Silver cutlery gleamed under the soft glow of crystal chandeliers, and delicate vases of white roses adorned the center. Sophie Hawthorne, soon to be Sophie Cartwright, smoothed the folds of her pale blue dress and tried to steady her breathing. She had spent the past few days rehearsing polite smiles, perfecting her answers to every possible question from Oliver's relatives, and ensuring she made no social misstep. Tonight was supposed to be about joy, unity, and family. Oliver, tall and warm-eyed, squeezed her hand as they entered the dining room. "You're going to be brilliant," he murmured. Sophie smiled, but her gaze flickered to the far end of the table where Lady Beatrice Hawthorne sat like a queen on her throne, her silver hair swept into an elegant chignon, her pearl necklace gleaming as sharply as her eyes. Sophie had met her future grandmother-in-law only twice before, both encounters leaving her with the unsettling feeling of being quietly measured. The chatter swelled as relatives arrived, exchanging kisses on cheeks and admiring the arrangements. Waiters in crisp white shirts moved deftly between the guests, topping up glasses with champagne. Sophie tried to join in the conversations, speaking of the weather, of the wedding flowers, of the charming local church where they would exchange vows. Yet every now and then, she caught Lady Beatrice watching her, a faint curl of disapproval on her lips. When the first course was served, Oliver rose to give a toast. His voice carried warmth, speaking of love, gratitude, and excitement for the day to come. Sophie felt her chest swell with affection. She believed, in that moment, that the evening might pass peacefully after all. But then, as the plates were cleared and a fresh round of champagne was poured, Lady Beatrice tapped her glass with the tip of her spoon. The room fell silent. All eyes turned to her. Her smile was polite but cold. "It is a rare thing," she began, "to welcome a new member into a family as old as ours. We have traditions, values, and, above all, standards." She paused, her gaze fixed on Sophie. "And sometimes it is difficult to tell whether one is joining us for love, or for the family's fortune." The words struck like shards of ice. A ripple of discomfort moved through the room. Sophie's heart thudded in her chest. She could feel Oliver stiffen beside her, but Lady Beatrice's eyes did not leave hers. "You see," the old woman continued, "in my day, we were taught to be cautious of gold diggers." The last two words hung in the air like a blade. The golden light of the setting sun spilled through the tall mullioned windows of Hawthorne Manor's dining hall, bathing the room in a warm glow. The long oak table gleamed under crystal chandeliers, adorned with silver cutlery and fine bone china. A scent of roasted lamb and rosemary drifted through the air. Laughter and clinking glasses filled the space, the hum of polite conversation echoing beneath the painted ceiling. Emily sat beside Sophie, feeling the young woman's hand tremble faintly under the table. Oliver was on Sophie's other side, leaning in to speak quietly to her, his smile gentle and reassuring. Across from them, Lady Beatrice sat like a carved statue, her posture perfect, her eyes keen and calculating. As the first course was cleared, Lady Beatrice's voice sliced through the chatter. "So, Sophie," she began, each syllable precise and deliberate. "Tell us again about your work. I always find it fascinating how fortunate some people are when it comes to securing a comfortable future." The room fell slightly quieter. Sophie's cheeks flushed, yet she managed a polite smile. "I work as a conservator at the Ashford Museum, restoring historic paintings. It's something I've worked towards for many years." Lady Beatrice's lips curved into something that was not quite a smile. "Indeed. And now, you will marry into a family with an estate and history stretching back centuries. Quite the leap, wouldn't you say? From paints and brushes to pearls and silver spoons." A murmur swept through the guests. Emily's fingers tightened around her wine glass. She could see Sophie's knuckles whiten as she gripped her napkin. Oliver's tone hardened. "Grandmother, that's enough." But Lady Beatrice's eyes never left Sophie. "One must always be sure," she continued softly, yet every word carried, "that a bride comes for love, and not for the weight of a name or the gold in the vault." The air turned still. Sophie lowered her gaze, but Emily caught the glint of moisture in her eyes. Somewhere near the end of the table, a fork clattered against a plate. Outside, the wind rustled the ivy against the windows, a low whisper against the glass. Lady Beatrice sipped her wine, her gaze unwavering. And in that moment, Emily realized this was not an offhand remark, it was a deliberate strike. A warning. A challenge. The clinking of cutlery and the soft murmur of conversation filled the oak-paneled dining room of Hawthorne Hall. The flickering light from the crystal chandeliers cast a warm, golden glow over the long table, set with gleaming silverware and crystal goblets. Sophie sat beside Oliver, her hand resting lightly in his, a picture of calm to anyone who cared to look. Inside, though, her stomach was tight with unease. Lady Beatrice sat opposite, her back straight as a lance, her eyes fixed on Sophie in a way that felt almost surgical. She had been polite throughout the soup and fish courses, but her smiles were thin, her compliments laced with a cool edge. Emily noticed it too, her own smile tightening with each passing moment. It was during the main course, roast lamb with rosemary, that the air changed. Lady Beatrice set down her knife with a soft clink, the sound sharp in the otherwise gentle hum of the room. She cleared her throat delicately, yet the effect was commanding. "I feel it only proper," she began, her voice carrying down the length of the table, "that before we proceed any further, we speak plainly about certain matters." The conversations around them faltered and died. Every eye turned to her. Oliver's jaw tightened. "Grandmother, this is hardly the time." But she lifted a hand, silencing him with the quiet authority of someone used to being obeyed. Her gaze returned to Sophie, unwavering. "We in the Hawthorne family have always valued tradition, integrity, and loyalty. And we have never suffered opportunists lightly." A faint murmur rippled down the table. Sophie felt her cheeks flush, but she forced herself to meet Lady Beatrice's stare. "Grandmother," Oliver began again, his voice taut with warning. "I shall speak my mind," Lady Beatrice continued, her voice calm but edged with steel. "I believe this young woman is here for reasons other than love. And I believe my grandson is blind to them." The words seemed to fall into the silence like a stone into deep water. Sophie felt her breath catch, her heart pounding in her ears. The air seemed suddenly thinner, harder to draw in. Emily's chair scraped against the polished oak floor as she stood, her expression a mixture of shock and outrage. "That is an unfounded accusation, Beatrice," she said, her tone sharper than anyone at the table had ever heard from her. But Lady Beatrice merely folded her hands in her lap and waited, her expression unreadable. Sophie's voice trembled only slightly when she spoke. "If you truly believe that, my lady, perhaps you should say precisely what you think I have done." A pause followed, heavy with expectation. Then Lady Beatrice leaned forward, her eyes glinting in the candlelight. "Very well. I have proof." The dining room fell utterly silent, the only sound the faint hiss of the fire in the hearth. Every face was turned to Lady Beatrice, waiting for the next blow to fall. The following morning, the usually tranquil gardens of Hawthorne Hall were buzzing with quiet tension. Sophie had been wandering the rose path, her fingers trailing along the petals, when she overheard Lady Beatrice in hushed conversation with Aunt Margaret by the fountain. "She will ruin this family," Lady Beatrice said, her voice sharp yet low. "I can see it in her eyes. She is after the Hawthorne fortune." Aunt Margaret replied cautiously. "Beatrice, you are letting your pride speak. The girl seems kind enough." Sophie's chest tightened. The words pierced her like thorns. She tried to step away unnoticed, but the crunch of gravel underfoot betrayed her presence. Both women turned, their eyes landing on her with an unreadable mix of surprise and scrutiny. "Good morning," Sophie said, forcing a polite smile, though her voice trembled ever so slightly. "I did not mean to intrude." Lady Beatrice's gaze was cold. "Then perhaps you should take care where you wander, my dear." By midday, the atmosphere inside the hall had grown heavier. Emily tried to keep conversation light over tea, speaking of floral arrangements and seating charts, but Oliver sensed the undercurrent. When Sophie excused herself to the library, Oliver followed. He found her standing by the tall windows, staring out over the sprawling lawns. "What happened?" he asked softly. "Nothing," she replied too quickly, then shook her head. "Your grandmother does not believe in us, Oliver. And I do not know how to change her mind." Oliver reached for her hand. "Then we will show her. Together." But Sophie's thoughts were already tangled with something else, an odd exchange she had witnessed the night before between Lady Beatrice and a man she did not recognize, who had slipped a sealed envelope into the old woman's hand. The memory of it now gnawed at her, as if the truth behind it might be the key to everything. And later that night, long after the hall had gone quiet, Sophie would see that same man again, this time, not in the gardens, but standing in the shadows outside her bedroom door. The next morning, mist clung to the rolling hills as Emily made her way to Hawthorne Manor. The sprawling estate loomed ahead, its honey-colored stone glowing faintly under a pale sun. Ivy climbed up the walls, and the grand oak doors seemed older than time itself. Inside, the air carried the scent of polished wood and faint lavender, a reminder of generations past. Sophie stood in the drawing room, gazing out towards the gardens. Her face was pale but resolute. Emily approached, placing a gentle hand on her arm. "You have every right to be here," Emily said softly. "This is your home to be." Sophie's eyes flicked towards the doorway where Lady Beatrice appeared, dressed impeccably in a navy suit, her silver hair arranged in a perfect chignon. Her gaze was cold, her presence commanding. "Emily," Lady Beatrice began, her voice sharp but measured, "I trust you are here to discuss last night's unfortunate events." Emily met her gaze without flinching. "I'm here to ensure Oliver's future isn't ruined by bitterness." Lady Beatrice's lips curled into a faint smile. "Bitterness? No, my dear. Caution. Sophie is not what she seems. And soon, you will see it for yourself." The tension thickened, like the air before a storm. Sophie's fingers tightened around the edge of the window frame. Emily sensed that Lady Beatrice knew something she was holding back, ready to unleash at the perfect moment. From the corridor came the faint sound of hurried footsteps. Oliver entered, a letter in his hand, his brow furrowed. "This was left at the gate," he said, holding it out to Emily. The envelope was old-fashioned, sealed with crimson wax bearing the Hawthorne crest. Inside, in looping handwriting, was a single sentence. "The gold she seeks is buried deeper than you think." Emily looked up, her pulse quickening. Lady Beatrice's expression remained unreadable, but there was the faintest flicker in her eyes, as if she recognized the words. Somewhere within the walls of Hawthorne Manor, a secret waited to be uncovered. The night had fallen deep over Hawthorne Manor, the last traces of sunset bleeding into a dark indigo sky. The laughter and chatter from the dining room had faded to a muffled hum behind closed doors. Sophie slipped away quietly, her heels clicking softly on the marble floor as she made her way to the gardens for a breath of cold air. The roses, heavy with dew, bent under the weight of the evening moisture, their scent drifting on the crisp breeze. She let out a long breath, the cold mist curling before her lips. But her moment of solitude shattered when she heard voices in the distance. Hidden behind a row of tall hedges, Sophie paused and tilted her head. It was Lady Beatrice, her voice sharp and laced with disdain. "She thinks she can charm her way into our fortune. But Oliver is blind." "Completely blind," Lady Beatrice said. Another voice answered. This one was lower, male, and strangely familiar. If she gets what she wants, Beatrice, you know it will ruin the Hawthorne name. We cannot allow it. Sophie's stomach tightened. She knew she should leave before they noticed her, but her feet rooted to the gravel path. Who was the man? And why did his tone carry the weight of someone with authority in the family? The wind shifted, carrying the faint creak of the old iron gate. Sophie realized too late that it wasn't the wind at all. Someone else was in the garden, and their shadow was slowly stretching toward her. The night had fallen deep over Hawthorne Manor, the last traces of sunset bleeding into a dark indigo sky. The laughter and chatter from the dining room had faded to a muffled hum behind closed doors. Sophie slipped away quietly, her heels clicking softly on the marble floor as she made her way to the gardens for a breath of cold air. The roses, heavy with dew, bent under the weight of the evening moisture, their scent drifting on the crisp breeze. She let out a long breath, the cold mist curling before her lips. But her moment of solitude shattered when she heard voices in the distance. Hidden behind a row of tall hedges, Sophie paused and tilted her head. It was Lady Beatrice, her voice sharp and laced with disdain. She thinks she can charm her way into our fortune. But Oliver is blind. Completely blind, Lady Beatrice said. Another voice answered. This one was lower, male, and strangely familiar. If she gets what she wants, Beatrice, you know it will ruin the Hawthorne name. We cannot allow it. Sophie's stomach tightened. She knew she should leave before they noticed her, but her feet rooted to the gravel path. Who was the man? And why did his tone carry the weight of someone with authority in the family? The wind shifted, carrying the faint creak of the old iron gate. Sophie realized too late that it wasn't the wind at all. Someone else was in the garden, and their shadow was slowly stretching toward her. The air in the Hawthorne estate gardens was sharp with the chill of early spring. Moonlight cast silver streaks across the manicured hedges and glimmered faintly upon the surface of the ornamental pond. Sophie stood beneath the sprawling branches of an ancient oak, her shawl pulled tightly around her shoulders. She could hear the soft crunch of footsteps on gravel behind her. Turning, she found herself face to face with Lady Beatrice. The older woman's expression was carved from ice, her posture stiff, her eyes narrowing with a mixture of suspicion and something darker, an unspoken fear. You think you can charm everyone here, do you? Lady Beatrice's voice was low, almost hissing. You may have Oliver fooled, but you will not deceive me. Sophie's throat tightened. I am not trying to deceive anyone. I love him. That is all. Love. Lady Beatrice gave a bitter laugh. Love is not what I see when I look at you. I see ambition. I see someone who knows exactly what she stands to gain. She stepped closer, her voice lowering further. And I see someone who will be very sorry if she does not walk away now. For a moment, neither moved. The quiet rustle of leaves filled the space between them. Sophie took a deep breath, her voice steady but trembling at the edges. I will not walk away. You can hate me if you must, but I will not abandon Oliver. Lady Beatrice's gaze flickered, just for a moment, as though Sophie's words had struck somewhere deeper than she intended. But then the hardness returned, and she turned sharply, her footsteps vanishing into the night. As Sophie stood alone under the oak, a faint light caught her attention from one of the upstairs windows. It was in the study, Oliver's father's study, where no one was supposed to be. The silhouette of a figure moved swiftly inside, then disappeared from view. A shiver ran down Sophie's spine. She knew that whoever it was not Oliver. The rehearsal dinner had ended, but the tension it stirred lingered like a stubborn fog. Guests had begun to leave the candlelit hall of the Crown and Stag, yet small clusters of people still whispered in hushed tones, their glances darting towards me. I stepped outside into the cool night air, my breath forming clouds in the dim glow of the street lamps. Behind me, I heard footsteps, slow, deliberate. I turned to see Oliver's grandmother, her figure framed in the doorway, eyes glittering in the half-light. "You think you've won," she said, her voice cutting through the quiet. "But I know people like you. You'll take what you can, and when there's nothing left, you'll leave." Her words were sharp, each one landing like a blade. I wanted to defend myself, to tell her she was wrong, but something in her gaze stopped me. This wasn't about me. This was about something else, something buried deep in the family's past. Before I could speak, a voice called from the shadows of the alley beside the inn. "She's not the one you should be worried about." Both of us turned. A tall man stepped forward, his face partially hidden by the brim of his hat. My pulse quickened. I had never seen him before, yet there was something unsettlingly familiar about the way he carried himself. Oliver appeared at the door, his face pale. "We need to go inside," he said urgently, but his eyes weren't on me. They were fixed on the stranger. The man smiled faintly, as if he knew a secret none of us were ready to hear. "Your family has debts, Oliver. Old debts. And she," he said, nodding towards me, "is about to inherit them." A cold shiver ran down my spine.